Thank you so much once again, Ms. Riyadi, Mr. Tam, and of course our Indonesia correspondent, Shotaro Tani. Let's give them a round of applause for their insights. Now, I will have the pleasure of helming our third panel, Green Businesses, Sustainable Development Through Decarbonization. We are very honored to have one of our supporters, Ocean Network Express, to join us here on the stage. Now, One's global HQ is in Singapore and is a joint venture formed of the three largest shippers in Japan, NYK, MOL, and K-Line. One provides a wide service coverage with the sixth largest fleet in the world, and besides Singapore, its other bases span the territories of Hong Kong, UK, the US, and Brazil. We are very pleased to have Mr. Jeremy Nixon, CEO of Ocean Network Express, joining us here today in person at Suntec, Singapore. Mr. Nixon? Now next, I'd like to welcome Mr. Jared Chng, CFO of ENGIE Southeast Asia. Now ENGIE Southeast Asia specializes in helping companies with their decarbonization journey in the switch from traditional energy sources to renewable sources. Mr. Chng, please. And finally, dialing in virtually is Mr. Fulco Wijdooge, General Manager of China from the Moderator Group, joining us from the Chinese mainland. The company is a provider of innovative solutions for greenhouses in the field of horticulture and agri-tech. Very pleased to have Mr. Fulco join us here today.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Now, I think there's no better way to start off than to just refer to the COP26 Climate Summit. Gentlemen, you can remove your mask as well. Happened last year, which threw up the Glasgow Climate Pact. If you're a glass half full kind of guy, you'd say, well, at least there's some guardrails in place where governments can work together to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. And if they stick to the plan, perhaps we'll see them come together and we'll have global warming at less than 2 degrees Celsius a year. But if you are a cynical person, you'd say, well, it's all blah, 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 according to Ms. Greta Thunberg, and then you'll say there's nothing much being done at the end of the day. So that's on the part of governments. But the panel today, we're going to focus on the role of corporations in the agenda of climate change. It's not just institutions of authority coming together around the world and speaking about how we can reduce greenhouse gases, but of course the private sector as well has to play their part in order for us to create a sustainable future for future generations. I think there's no better place to start than at the nexus of global commerce, and we'll start with the shipping industry. 90% of world trade relies on players from this area, but at the same time, the industry does produce 3% of carbon dioxide emissions in the world. Jeremy, I just want to turn to you and ask you for your thoughts on how players in your industry and even your company itself can contribute to sustainable development.
Thank you, Dylan, and good afternoon, everybody. It's a great honor and a pleasure to be here. And just to our global head office is in Singapore, as you mentioned, just 1 kilometer away from this building. So it was nice and easy to get here. Yeah, by way of introduction initially anyway, Ocean Network Express is one of the major global container shipping companies in the world. We have around 10,000 employees. We're active in about 150 countries in the world. And we operate the container ships, we operate containers. In some cases, we actually operate the trucking operation and also the terminals where that is actually allowed, depending on the country's regulations. And we offer, like many of our competitors, an end-to-end network of some 10 to 15,000 ports, where we'll move a full container load in a 20-foot or 40-foot container or 45-foot container across some 10,000 port pairs on a fixed day, weekly basis, right across the globe. So that's our business, and container shipping is one of a number of shipping sectors. But the unique thing about container shipping is that we actually own and operate the ships and the assets, and we have something like 70,000 customers. So on any one ship, instead of just having one owner of the cargo, actually we have multiple owners of the cargo. And so therefore we have to be not just ship operators, but actually we have to be very good at logistics as well, and being able to work with multiple clients across multiple platforms in multiple parts of the world. So that's a bit of background on our company. And as you mentioned, we have Japanese shareholders in Tokyo, but our global head office is here in Singapore, and we have regional offices in 5 other regions in the world as well.
Now, Jared, I turn to you and your company, which is really in the process of moving away from relying solely on traditional energy sources and indeed helping your clients and customers make the switch to more renewable energy sources. And in fact, there are some interesting projects in the region that you have taken part in. Why don't you give us an overview of the efforts your company is doing in terms of contributing to the journey towards decarbonization?
Yeah, thank you, Dylan, and I'm very happy and honored to be here. Let me just first start by saying that ENGIE's purpose is to accelerate carbon neutrality. So there's no clearer and more energizing purpose than this. And we do it by 2 ways. One, we have been growing our renewables arm. So we are a major player in the Americas, in Europe, in large-scale solar farm, wind. And another growth sector that we have is in the area of energy solutions, where we actually help our customers reduce their energy reliance. And there's a saying in our company that there's no cleaner and no cheaper energy than energy that is safe. And that is what we seek to do here, especially here in Singapore. I'm happy to talk later in the conversations about our partnerships that we have with JTC as well as with ComfortDelGro in the area of district cooling as well as EV charging. Thank you.
Now, Fulco, I turn to you all the way from China. Thank you for joining us once again. And we'd like to hear as well, in your area of agri-tech and horticulture, the fact that you are helping people who are those in the industry using greenhouses to accelerate the transition to using efficient technology for the purpose. Tell us a bit about how the issue of and the agenda of sustainable development factors into the kind of work that your company does.
Well, of course, we are a solution provider in protected agriculture to optimize the climate, and with the goal actually to raise yields and quality of the produce, and also lowering costs, and of course the use of energy, because energy resources is one of the main bottlenecks, and it's also where we help our clients, not only by increasing the efficiency, but also reducing the amount of labor in a greenhouse. Also finding new solutions to make efficient use of everything that goes on. So you optimize both the processes as well as the total energy use. And this is partly by systems, but only technology is not enough. So you also need to give the right training, the right support. And of course, you need to look and connect the right new energy sources, but also existing ones. And for example, with geothermal energy that are clean and healthy. And of course, one good thing with the greenhouse industry is that we actually use CO2. There's a demand for that. And actually, it's another bottleneck. So also we can make use of waste streams of factories and actually use this to good benefit in the greenhouse. In this way, decarbonization is realized in multiple ways.
Now, of course, the topic is about green businesses, and we can't talk about the journey towards decarbonization without touching on the subjects of disruption that have come up in this area, for example. We have 3 diverse sectors here: shipping, energy, and of course, agri-tech. I think, Jeremy, I want to come to you first on the issue of disruption and the kind of crises that we have seen emerge throughout the course of the COVID-19 pandemic. The big issue that comes to mind in shipping is the supply chain disruption that we've seen globally as well, coming from your particular industry. So in terms of how it relates to climate change, there appears to be, in the minds of people, perhaps not a very strong link. Well, you have supply chain disruptions, I'm not getting my goods on time, but does it have an environmental impact in that sense? And from your point of view, is there a sort of linkage that we can focus our minds around and talk about this so that we can see exactly what the knock-on effects of this supply chain disruption is?
Yeah, so shipping as an industry globally has a number of challenges, particularly in the area of decarbonization. So historically, 90% of global trade has moved by water on ships or by barge. And traditionally, if we go back 150 years ago, we moved by wind power, then we switched over to coal power, then we moved over to fossil fuel, oil-based fuels. And that is the 99.9% of all ships today and barges operate using fuel oil. And that equates to about 3% of the global carbon emissions of the total global output. So we are a hard to abate industry. We're maybe not as much carbon disruptor as some other sectors, like maybe the cement or the steel industry or the landside transport operators, but 3% is very significant. We have 60,000 ships out there as an industry today, burning about 250 million tons of fuel oil. And the key challenge really for us is that today there are not really any zero emission fuels available at scale for our industry to use. And we need to develop those, we need to develop the technology, and we need probably about close to $1.5 trillion worth of financing over the next 30 years to switch from an industry which has traditionally moved on fuel oil to zero emission fuels. So that's the kind of problem statement of the industry, and I want to talk later on about many of the things that we're working towards that and how I think actually industry is almost ahead of government on that. But just back to your point, Dylan, I mean, obviously the disruptions we're all very much aware of in terms of global supply chain challenges, and today those challenges are actually on the land side, not on the ocean side. So the backing up of all the ships and the delays to the ships is actually caused by the port congestion and the landside congestion operations. And the backing up of the ships and delay of the ships and the waiting of the ships actually does have a significant environmental cost, because we normally run all our networks, as do our competitors, to absolutely optimize the speed and fuel consumption between A to B to C to D. And when ships get caught up or delayed, we then have wasted time. They're wasting and burning carbon fuels while they're sitting there at anchor, like you can see off Singapore here. And secondly, when they do get back and out to sea, they have to speed up and move at much higher speeds than they're normally designed to do. And that means that they then consume a lot more fuel. So the current supply chain issues are not just about customers getting their cargo on time and quicker, it's also about the inefficiencies that it's caused to the global supply chain and the knock-on impact that has to the environment.
Yeah, Jeremy, I want to continue to stay with you for a moment. It's an interesting point you've raised that when ships are out at sea, the so-called efficiency of the schedules are not being met, and therefore you result in burning and emitting more fuel and emissions. In this case, is there anything that you and your peers are racing towards to sort of mitigate the situation? Any sort of interim steps that you can take, whether it's in technology or more efficient planning, or more efficient strategization of the use of your resources? Or do you think actually there's not much there is to be done? Just wait, and this situation will, in time, ease itself out. So in a sense, time is the antidote. Or is there something that can actually be done while we are seeing all this disruption going on, where your industry is concerned?
Well, ultimately, the root cause of all our industry's issues, including shipping, is unfortunately COVID. And the COVID situation in multiple countries is resulting in workers having short staffing workers, people having to quarantine, people are not available to work at the same levels as they did before. We're having to put distancing solutions in place. So the warehouses, the distribution centers, the ports, the availability of truckers, etc., is all having a knock-on impact. So the fundamental easiest way to resolve the global supply chain actually is to resolve COVID and get us back to a situation where we have the resources on the labor side for the landside operation to recover. Having said that, the shipping industry has deployed literally every last ship available globally, every container globally, and despite that, we still have a shortage of something like 20% of our capacity, because instead of a service taking 5 weeks to get round, it's now taking 7 to 8 weeks to get round. So ergo, the number of ships you have, the number of volume you're moving at the moment has slowed down. But of course, we are coming up with creative solutions where we can to skip ports or to use AI and machine learning to better predict consumers' behavior and try to predict weather systems, et cetera, to try to get the ships back on schedule faster and quicker. But unfortunately, the fundamental 90% of this is back to COVID, and we do need to fix that.
Well, it's interesting that technology as well is being used as some sort of a stopgap solution, or at least been explored to help in mitigating the situation. And technology is something that your company is very much into in terms of helping your customers making the move from carbon-heavy footprint to reducing the carbon footprint. So when it comes to the development of renewable energy sources as well today, what do you see is the trend when it comes to your customers coming to you and which industries around the world facing in which they want to make the switch? How can they make the switch efficiently and in a way that it's cost efficient so that it doesn't eat into their profits, so to speak?
Yes, thanks. So typically when customers come to us, we look at two main issues. They come to us with two main issues. One is that first, they do not know how to start. Decarbonization or a green business is an in thing, and everybody wants to hop on this bandwagon. And there are many technologies out there, and typically customers might not know where to start. That's one issue. The second issue, of course, this being a finance guy is important, is that many people think that green business is not a profit-making business. So that's something that also I think we have created win-win partnerships with our various customers, and happy to share them in this forum. Now, so first, of course, we pride ourselves at ENGIE as an end-to-end service provider. If you look at it, basic solar to EV charging, we will provide an end-to-end solution. So typically when customers come to us, what we pride ourselves in is the ability to offer an end-to-end solution. And then with regard to creating win-win partnerships that make sense, we looked at three main industries that we have co-created. One in the data centers, two pharmaceuticals and electronics. And these are industries where for example, in the pharma sector, what we have done is we have developed and invested and own and operate their utility systems. We offered our company, which is a pharmaceutical company, energy efficiency guarantee. So we lower their energy usage. And at the same time, we own and operate. Now, how this works is that the customers then are able to concentrate. Effectively, they have outsourced their utility function. They save on manpower, they save on procurement, they save on the O&M of a 15-year to 30-year contract. At the same time, us as energy experts come in and we operate and maintain for them for a basic fee. So that's how I think we can create win-win partnerships at a very cost-effective business model for both our customers and us. Thank you.
Fulco, I want to come to you over from China, and I think out of the four of us over here, you're sitting in a place where we are seeing a lot of developments come to the fore in the area of sustainable development. When we talk again about the theme of disruption, one thing that comes to mind that China has seen a lot of is, of course, the energy crunch or the energy crisis that really came to the fore towards the end of last year, the last quarter of the year or so. Now, in your area of agri-tech, I'm not sure how much you're seeing this feed into your operations and the way you serve your customers. Now you have China coming to industries and saying, hey, look, we do have our targets to meet in terms of reducing emissions, so please watch your energy consumption and the way you use coal and produce energy itself. In the agri-tech industry, in the greenhouse industry, how has that affected the way, for example, you go about your activities?
Well, you can definitely see that the energy, the change in the policy here is pretty big. It has a big impact. Prices are going up, so this has a big impact also on the industry. So people really demand a solution to find new ways to reduce energy costs. For them, for most of our clients, the main reason is to lower energy costs. For Chinese government, the decarbonization policy is really strict now, and you see a big change. So what we are doing and what we are trying to find is not only supplying our technology to optimize the climate, but actually also looking how to combine other kinds of resources, like I already mentioned, waste streams, which can be reused. So there's actually helping the decarbonization, but also it helps to lower costs and lower the use of conventional energy resources. Thirdly, we also look at new energy sources and not only the renewables with solar power, but also, like I mentioned, geothermal, which is 6 to 8 times more energy efficient than conventional resources. So in that way, we also have to think not only about our own technology, so that's climate computers to optimize the climate in the greenhouse, but also how we connect it and how we going to control and optimize the energy resources and the usage and where to find it. And you see that this demand is this year and last year it has gone up tremendously, also because of the policy changes in China. And I think it's now one of it has always been one of the hottest topics, but definitely now it's the make or break decision whether greenhouse projects can be successful in this market. So we really have to look beyond our own technology, so we can definitely reduce and we can optimize it, but we also have to look how we combine it with others. And a very good thing is, of course, it's all local for local. That policy is really helping. Before we a lot of imports of vegetables, of fruits. Actually, what we are trying to do is, of course, is to have everything localized, so that we reduce the carbon, the footprint tremendously, and also, of course, reduce the waste. I think what Linus mentioned in the previous session, it's the consumer is central as a central position in an integrated ecosystem, and that's what we're trying to build. It's not just looking at from a technology point of view or our end users point of view, but especially the consumer, and also make sure that we reduce waste. There's more emphasis now also from the consumer on decarbonization, efficient use, healthy vegetables, healthy crops. So I think in this way, we're combining technology with also the mindsets and also fitting the policies of the government here.
Now, Fulco, clearly the availability of gas in the Chinese market has been an impact to industries in China and those who are doing business in China. And we are also in a period of rising oil prices. How much would you say that has accelerated the need to shift urgently towards more renewable sources of energy, be it geothermal or other sources? From your point of view, operating over there, what is it that your peers are doing? What are you observing companies doing in this area in even meeting the cost issues that are involved in this area?
Well, definitely has a very big impact. Already, like I mentioned, it was a major factor, but so now you see that it is it's even more, because there's not only a price issue, it's also because there's just a scarcity of resources. So companies are also forced to find new ways to find new ways to make sure that at least they have sufficient energy and which they can use. So it's not only about the pricing, but it's also about the scarcity of resources, and that indeed has a big impact. And companies, of course, are also encouraged to invest in agriculture, but also to find new ways. So we see also a big role for digitalization and also for robotics. This is also a new development that helps the industry. Of course, there's a lot of waste, also mismanagement, and bind together. It's not only about energy, it's about the whole operation. How can we make it more efficient? And this combination throughout the whole chain, that will help to finally to reduce the carbon footprint, and also the squeeze we see in all this resource. So there's a lack of gas, and of course this is very important for CO2 in the greenhouse. So we have boilers running on that, and actually some projects don't have that. So you have to find different ways. So in that sense, we need to go beyond our own technology and our own ways of handling this, and we really need to connect all the dots to have the whole infrastructure and the whole ecosystem integrated, and make sure that it's working efficiently and that it's connected.
Now, Jeremy, looking into technology, and Mr. Fulco has mentioned, is that something that industries are looking at in terms of the various ways in which you can explore how you can decarbonize. For shipping, it may not be such a clear-cut journey. On land over here, we always talk about moving from internal combustion engine-powered vehicles to electric vehicles, and there's always a conversation that comes up. You don't have electric ships being part of the conversation. It's not as much heard, or other sources of energy that ships can be powered by, aside from traditional sources. In your mind, we're looking ahead to the future. What do you think are the sort of energy sources that the shipping industry can explore to reduce reliance, at least, from the traditional energy sources that they are so dependent on these days?
Thank you, Dylan. Well, I started off by explaining the industry's significance, the industry's challenge. I'd like to now talk more about, as you rightfully say, the solutions and how we're going to get there. So we have shipping globally has an industry regulator, part of the UN. It's called the IMO, the International Maritime Organization. It's based in London and it oversees the regulatory framework for global shipping. And we're very fortunate to have such a body. Not every industry does. And they have set a target for shipping to reduce its carbon emissions globally, greenhouse emissions, by 50% from 2008 level by 2050. But actually, as an industry, I think there's growing consensus that we want to be much more ambitious than that. And actually, we would like to get to net zero emissions by 2050, rather than just halving our footprint. But as I alluded to earlier, today, there is no immediate available fuel type. We know that potentially hydrogen atoms converted into ammonia is one very strong potential. The second one is methanol. And the third one is potentially some kind of synthetic type of LNG type compound. But all of these today, the technology and the amount of renewable energy to produce this as a green zero emission fuel is not there yet. Just from back to that original point I made, we're using 250 million tons of fuel oil today. That equates to, literally over a billion tons of green hydrogen would be required. So we know that the world has a shortage at the moment of these renewable energies, but we have to make sure that shipping will get its fair share, because back to your point, Dylan, we can't just plug in our ships and run them on the electricity grid. The battery technology at the moment is not sufficient to run 100,000 ton ships across oceans for 30 days. So we do need to go down the ammonia route, go down the methanol route, and potentially the synthetic LNG route. There's a lot of effort being made to do that, a lot of design, a lot of technology. We set up the Global Carbon Decarbonization Center for Maritime Decarbonization globally here in Singapore. We're one of the founding members of that, as are other people, as is government joining that. But fundamentally, the problem is that today, fuel oil is about $600 a ton. These new fuel types are probably going to be about $2,000 a ton initially. So we have a $1,400 to $1,500 gap, 4 times more expensive, these fuels. So this is a significant barrier, and the operators of the ships cannot just absorb that cost by themselves. So we need to work on having market-based measures which will reduce, will make fuel oil come up to a more competitive level in line with the zero-emission fuels and give back some type of revenue back to the industry, to those companies which are moving with the low-emission fuels. So we need to have market-based measures. We need to have more command and control structures in place from the IMO. They've already dictated to us that our ships will have to have a certain carbon intensity by 2024, reducing up to 2030. More details are needed on that. So it's getting the financing, it's getting the fuel, and of course it's getting the bunkering systems as well in place. So today Singapore is the largest bunkering port in the world. 50 million tons of fuel oil is bunkered through Singapore every year. That needs to be replaced by ammonia, methanol, hydrogen, potentially synthetic LNG over the next 10 to 20 years. So we've also got to get the bunkering systems in place. But we have to work together as an industry, and we have to work with our regulator. And we certainly, as an industry, are pushing very hard to do that. I personally was at COP26. I'm also involved as the co-chairman of the World Shipping Council, which represents all the container shipping companies. And we are very committed to moving ahead quicker than the regulators are, but we need government and the regulators to support us with the market-based measures and also with some of this bunkering infrastructure to really be successful.
I'd like to pick up on your point on the transition to greener fuels on that part. At this point in time, there's all this talk about how those in the industry, or in your industry in particular, are seeing surging profits at this juncture. Can that money be used to accelerate development in this area? You're seeing a lot of upside in that sense, despite the disruption in terms of the opportunities for making money. But can some of that be diverted towards really accelerating and investing in the switch at this time when the industry itself seems to be profitable?
Yeah, Dylan, I think what you're referring to is that container shipping, as with other sectors of shipping, has seen unprecedented levels of return on investment this year. But that's benchmarked against the last 15 years where it's really struggled to even return its return on investment. So it's been a very, very unprofitable industry for a very long time, which resulted in a lot of consolidation to try and get it back to a level playing field, level performance. But yes, the last 12 months has caused a lot of operational disruption, but it has been favorable for freight rates, and therefore the profitability of the industry is exceptionally good this year. But as I alluded to, $10 or $20 billion worth of profit as an industry is good, but we've got to make close to $1.5 trillion worth of investment to decarbonize our industry over the next 20 to 30 years. So we need sustainable profitability, but we also need to have very strong balance sheets to be able to work with the banks, the green financing sector, the fuel companies to move that forward. But we are taking strong efforts at the moment to invest in new ships and new designs, set up decarbonization centers, increase our collaboration. So the profits are getting put back onto the sustainability center. But ultimately, the fundamental thing that we need is more green energy. The world needs that, the shipping industry needs that, and we need to see much more investment by the fuel companies in generating green hydrogen so that we can bring that on stream in the next 5 to 7 years.
Jared, I come to you and talk about some of your interesting projects that you have in Singapore. You have the district cooling system in Punggol. You have tie-ups with ComfortDelGro to accelerate sort of, to help companies at least transition towards greener forms of energy. Now, when it comes to this kind of conversation, I was talking to Jeremy about profits and costs, and you alluded to this earlier, that the green business can be a profitable business in a sense, depending on the way you look at it. Is that really so? How can you convince people who have relied on traditional energy sources for so long and become so dependent on them that making that switch to something new which at the start may be expensive, is worthwhile in the long term in terms of the bottom line for their companies?
Thanks, Dylan, and very insightful, Jeremy, on the challenges that the shipping industry faces. I was actually reminded of the solar industry. I mean, 10 years ago, the solar industry, basically nobody thought it was expensive, right? But then there was so much investments made, and solar panel prices dropped. And today, solar is one of the most competitive sources of energy around. So that's our fundamental belief that green business is good business. Talking a bit about, so similarly with the car industry, and you're going to see, major disruptions coming, at least in Singapore in the next 3 to 5 years. And what is interesting about our collaboration with ComfortDelGro is that we come as an energy player, and they are a mobility player. So we believe that this combination will really start to hit the ground running when it comes to implementing, EV charging stations all around Singapore. So we are very excited about this particular joint venture that we have. We think that this, in the next couple of years, electric vehicles is going to rise, and so will EV charging. So that's one of the areas. Now, another area would also be in the area of district cooling. If you look at district cooling technologies today, basically, it is like a big central air conditioner, and effectively it gives tenants as well as landlords at least a 20 to 30% lower cost than having each tenant or unit building its own air condition. So I think that these technologies have all went through a lot of R&D, a lot of collaboration, and today we are actually beginning to see these business being very sustainable from a financial angle and from also a green angle.
Now, Fulco, talking about the business in agricultural technology, we want to see sustainable development in farming practices just generally as a whole, so that the industry can be responsible for at least the way it grows the crops and the way it contributes to ensuring that climate crisis is not exacerbated by unsustainable farming practices. Tell us about the kind of technology that you are seeing in the sector itself that can work towards this front.
Thanks, Dylan. Well, there are many new ways. So I think the interesting part that's coming up, it's as I mentioned, the robotics and the digitalization. Actually, that will mean that also you can reduce the number of people in an operation, and actually that's also good for the efficiency in the farm. We see new energy sources, renewable energy sources, which are helping, and of course we keep on continuing optimizing the more like a closed loop. So actually, we recycle already all the water in a project, and for energy, actually, we also with greenhouses we are able to generate energy. So on the one hand, there's a lot of inputs, whether it's gas or electricity. On the other hand, the conversion is into crop is pretty high, and it's getting higher and higher every year. And that means that actually whatever you put in, you get a better outcome, better results, and that of course is also helping to optimize the efficiency. If we're looking at the policy here in China, of course, it's also a neutral carbon neutrality by 2060. And that there's much more emphasis now really to look beyond the conventional way of just setting up a greenhouse. It's also about the way, the mindset. It's about the whole infrastructure, about education, training of people. It's not just related to technology anymore. It's a combination of technology, training, new ways of making sure that the industry will, on the one hand, be profitable, on the other hand, provides healthy and fresh, beneficial crops, and the third part also that actually you balance the use of energy and you reduce the carbon footprints. And this is not only for the government, but also for consumers and also for all the greenhouse growers. It's becoming more and more important. So basically, it's technology to optimize the climate in the greenhouse. So everything that's going on to optimize processes, digitalization, robotics, also to drive forward this, and then certainly new energy sources, renewable energy sources, and also fourthly also to combine everything. For example, we now see more projects with using biogas, actually, which is for manure from for example from pigs or poultry, and that actually is being used again in greenhouses. That's of course a great combination. So you get actually a much better reuse of and recycling and reuse of all the inputs you have and all the resources you have. So yeah, there are many ways to go, and it's not just related to only the technology, but it's actually a combination also with new practices, with new new ideas and new mindset.
It's interesting. We have a question all the way from Hungary, which I want to pick up from our online audience. And this viewer is making the devil's advocate argument, which I think would be a question perhaps that Jeremy, that you could address. And this person is arguing for greater localization for less impact on the environment, which means you cut down on international trade, you produce everything on site. If trucks don't have to move so much, you burn less fuel, transportation within a localized site. Is that something even worth thinking about, localization of production, and as well as you, in a sense, address the issue of supply chain by taking away the risk of all these complex linkages around the world? What do you think of this, Jeremy?
Well, I think you could argue that one of the reasons why we've seen such a growth in globalization over the last 25 years has been the labor arbitrage, which is the price of labor. But that is starting to adjust as the world's population in certain markets is not growing as fast as it was in the past, or is aging more. And in other locations, we're seeing also regulations coming in about minimum wage levels, etc. So the labor arbitrage question that gap will start to narrow and is narrowing. That's one issue. I think the second one is back to sustainability, back to the environmental cost and the implementation of market-based measures. So if products actually truly reflect the real cost of manufacturing them and of transporting them, then that will also be another leveling up matter. But I think that those that think that both of those developments will lead to rapid localization and the death of globalization will be probably quite surprised that as we're seeing in many of the markets, consumer markets today, actually we have such shortage of workers just in normal business activities, let alone in terms of trying to generate more manufacturing locally, that actually that we're not really able to localize that easily in Europe and in North America to replace that production which is happening out in Asia. And secondly, the costs of moving products around locally in vans and in trucks is actually is much more from a carbon footprint, much higher CO2 per ton mile than it is by moving it by ocean in big, large, efficient ships. So, of course, we need to balance both of these items. And one of the things that we keep looking at the moment, is there a major switch going to take place in terms of localization? At the moment, we don't really see that as a key driver at the moment, but we're always open to that potential. Yeah.
Jared, in terms of the whole discussion on sustainable development, in helping companies transition to more cleaner energy sources, if you're cynical, you say some people are doing it so that they foster what you call a very positive narrative about their company in the way they are doing CSR and corporate social responsibility in ESG issues. In the area of accountability, how do you think, from your experience, that this issue of greenwashing can be avoided in terms of helping really companies really make an impact in the transition and not just say we're doing this for the sake of the facade of the company?
Yeah, I think that firstly, of course, we are the fundamental belief that green business is good business. So the issue of greenwashing then becomes an issue of values, right, which we do not agree with. That said, I think the overall industry. I mean, I'm an accountant by training. It has spun off certifications, frameworks, green bond frameworks, and I think that a lot of these have very stringent criteria. And basically it spun off in this whole new industry that the auditors and accountants are also looking very closely onto. On the other hand, we have also seen some of the banks, when it comes to financing, tap on very established green bond frameworks by companies, and so that leverages and helps to shorten and reduce the amount of compliance costs. So I think that overall, I mean, there is on a positive note, actually, it has spun off a lot of industry, and it has given a lot of publicity to a green and sustainable business movement.
Now, Fulco, in terms of governmental intervention, we've talked about the role of businesses and how they can help to mitigate climate change. In terms of the policy side for governments, one thing being considered as well by many jurisdictions, indeed in Singapore, is the issue of tightening the carbon tax regime. For what you observe over there in East Asia, do you think that this is a way in which, by the government coming in, whether it's a carrot or stick approach, you can help businesses to ensure that they contribute responsibly in terms of conducting their operations and yet ensuring that it doesn't harm the environment that much?
Yeah, sure. I think indeed it's always a carrot and a stick. You cannot only use a stick to beat people into a certain direction. But of course, you can also stimulate them to take certain measures. For example, also help them to establish a renewable energy source, or to make use of, for example, better ways of preserving energy, or increasing the energy efficiency. So that's, if you're talking about regulation to enforce better practices, of course it will, in the end it will help the industry. You also can weed out some of the bad apples. It takes time, it takes efforts, and of course you need to also have the carrots to move them in the right direction. Otherwise businesses will go under. But of course you already see this happening. It's much more tightened, and really there's a lot of commitments, and also enforcement here of environmental laws. And this means that people are already moving into that direction. And you hear about complaints, but on the other hand, it also opens new doors, because people are now starting to look in better ways, not only to preserve the environment, but actually also to preserve their wallets, and to find new ways. That's why now we're talking daily. And today I had a conversation about new energy sources, about geothermal wells, and also about semi-closed greenhouses. So technologies that can help to reduce this carbon footprint, that can really optimize it. And this is back investments, but they are willing to take this step because they cannot. They can also see that it has some long-term positive effects on their wallet. In the end, they can become more profitable. But of course, the initial investment is pretty high, and they need to take certain steps. On the other hand, they are also getting some support to do so. So I think the whole environment here is also changing. It's not only a stick, but definitely there are also some interesting carrots that can help drive this forward. And the commitment to this plan in China, I think many other countries, carbon neutrality in 2050, 2060 means we have to take measures, and it will be a driver also of the development of the industry. It will cause some upsets. It will, I think, some businesses will falter, but together with some carrots, I think definitely you see that there's new way to move forward, and you already see this happening in China. Bigger projects, much more emphasis on the way we deal with energy. It's not like before that it was just a cost, but now really it's because of scarcity, because of regulations. They have to find new steps and new ways to become more operational efficient. and the other hand, adhere to the regulation and move forward to get to this carbon neutrality.
Oh, well, mindful of time, and I just want to give Jeremy the last word over here. Let's look towards the future. And when it comes to the issue of climate change, sustainable development, decarbonization, there's always a conversation about equity and balance for current generations, for future generations. As companies chase profits and make sure that year after year they turn around a sustainable business, what can they do in looking towards the future to make sure that the children of tomorrow will be able to live in a place where they don't have to worry about the world coming to a place where it's to confront the negatives of climate change and sustainable development in that sense?
Well, I think one of the things I've learned really over the last 5 years is that industry has gone from a position of being very defensive about decarbonization and in the environmental CSR agenda to being very proactive. And actually, I think now industry is ahead of government. And I think government is falling behind in terms of its commitments to create a cooperative platform and to develop forward. So I think many industries, including shipping, actually want to be much more proactive and will be more proactive if government doesn't follow and assist us. So I think, we're speaking on behalf of our customers because that's what they want. We're speaking on behalf of our staff, and we're speaking on behalf of our children and our future children's children, that we have to move forward strongly and committed. And I believe that industry wants to do that, and we can do that. We just need government to get on with it and push harder, and we need to get much better results than we did at COP26. Thank you.
So private-public sector collaboration, definitely a key ingredient in the issue of sustainable development. Thank you. Once again, let's give a round of applause for our panelists, Jeremy, Jared, and of course, Mr. Fulco coming from China. Thank you so much, gentlemen.